NST.net. You know, this is in some ways my favorite time of the year because I'm not beholden to a Ravens game last week or this week or what the Orioles are doing or even what the Terps did on Tuesday night, which was a lovely thing and beating Purdue and knocking off the number 12 team in the country and sort of re-resurrecting whatever is there of their season. And I don't know why people aren't going to the games. I guess on Tuesday night it was the weather or something like that. And when the weather gets bad, your roof gets screwed up. And Bill Cole comes to fix it all up, which is my nice way of saying welcome in, Bill Cole. It's good to be on your – is it a couch? Is it like a chaise lounge? How does it work, this therapy you and I do every week around here?
It's probably more like stumps in a field with like a bonfire or something. Yeah, I think that's kind of the type of therapy talks we have.
You know, I sort of work best with a lava lamp, and my friends from Sporticulture are working on a lava lamp for behind me. I've got the John Harbaugh Good, and I'm looking forward to the FCA banquet later on in the month with Frank Kelly because I'm going over. John Harbaugh is going to be speaking, so I want to hear about the legend of Good. And, you know, I begin every day with the enthusiasm unknown to mankind, as you well know. Dude, I got to get on the journalism thing this week with you. Am I allowed? I mean, can we skip through Terps and the Ravens and Harbaugh and DaCosta and free agency? You know, I'm not going to the Combine this year because the NFL has made it like no longer fun to go to the Combine for me, right? Like, so if you're not into having your liver fall out with Rod Woodson at 3 a.m, or Rex Ryan at 3 a.m, or Rob Ryan at 3 a.m, or Wink Martindale at 3 a.m, or Marvin Lewis at 3 a.m, or Jim Schwartz, which all worked for me when all of us were in our 20s and 30s. Now I'm in my 50s, and Indianapolis becomes this place that's just very cold, very sort of homogenized. You can eat it, you know, chain X or chain Y while you walk down Maryland Avenue. I mean, you've been there. You know the deal, right?
Sure.
I don't want to do it unless it's going to make my radio show better, or I'm going to have a lot of fun drinking late at night, and drinking late at night in Indianapolis just doesn't sound like fun. So anyway, but it brings me to the bigger topic, which is the NFL. I just came back from the Super Bowl. You're not going to find a bigger NFL fan than I, right? You would agree with that. Most of my life has been dedicated, much like it was dedicated to baseball, to the NFL. This Bob Costas story this week, while I'm not shocked by it, I'm not surprised. I don't even know whether I should be dismayed or disappointed or appalled or outraged or whatever that guy on the radio is supposed to be. And, you know, we've now seen earlier in the year a guy walk into an embassy and literally be tortured, dismembered, bone-sawed, picked up, flown back off to Saudi Arabia, and nobody says anything, right? So once you've seen that, once I'm now in my 13th year of being banned by a baseball team that can't give tickets away and can't sell, my reputation in Baltimore is far better than that of John Angelos. I promise you that. I could run for office and prove that. Maybe I will. But nonetheless, the Bob Costas thing is amazing, dude. And I want to just sit on your couch and have you talk me through how Bob Costas becomes the voice of the NFL, gets a little queasy about concussion and about brain injury, and speaks his mind, and then is literally just thrown off the network. Like, literally just thrown off the network. It's an amazing thing, and ESPN's reported it, and we all know who Bob Costas is. I think we all have some respect for Bob Costas, even though he stood on our field on 33rd Street and called out PP and Bouja on Art Modell moving the team. He called it rich with irony that Baltimore had to go steal a team. That is the way business is done in the NFL in 1995 and 96. And in 2019, the NFL's like, no. Unless you're going to paint this thing the way Rich Eisen does, you're not really going to work around here anymore. And now the NFL is dictating who works at NBC. It's an amazing thing. It really is.
Yeah, it seems like a tactical error on his part because I would put him in that camp of more likely to go whichever way the breeze blows. You know, to your point about, yeah, he seems pretty respectable, and I think he's done a good job, and I've enjoyed listening to him. But there are times where he says things that you don't agree with, or
that's fine. But
right.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, for me, he's all, and I guess the point of the story is You know his reputation. He has always stood on the 50-yard line in the middle of the Ravens coming to Baltimore and called out the truth, which is a city that lost its team had to go steal it. That was his point. Not a lot of people were pointing that out in that way, right? In sort of in the middle of the broadcast, in the middle of the field. So I have great respect for anyone who, like Teddy Roosevelt says, gets in the game, right? Puts the skin in the game. And he's also gone to the middle of Rio de Janeiro, right, and stayed at the Four Seasons and broadcasted down, amongst the favelas where they leveled basically half the city and threw them out so that they could build a stadium. You know what I mean? So, yeah, go ahead.
It wasn't risky for Bob to say that about the Ravens, Browns. That was the popular opinion amongst probably the rest of the country and all football fans.
Well, yeah, Bob Trumpy called the game and wished us empty stadiums and cold hot dogs and all that. He finally got it in 2018, by the way. But yeah, it took 23 years.
Yeah, so there was no risk in that decision to call it that way and to say the truth, like you're talking about. He had to know he was dealing with a stick of dynamite that could go the wrong way. But if he erred on the side of this is really what the larger populace needs to hear, wants to know, then that was where he went to it. And in our world today, man, we are really good at destroying people, and things get momentum, and with social media, all of a sudden it tears people down. So the NFL tends to be bulletproof when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. Why
look, the Browns signed a kid that was toxic 8 weeks ago, right? Like, literally, right? I mean, and now we're going to have to figure out how to tackle him 60 times next year, right?
Sure, but there's a bunch of those things. I mean, the whole Kaepernick thing, and then
they had a murderer. They had Aaron Hernandez murdering people and coming to work the next day, like literally. And all they do is win championships, and they just had a parade there last week. I don't know if you heard about that one or not, Bill. Right.
Yeah, I think, locally we have the Ray Rice version of that story, and that's where, dinner conversation went for me was, wow, what is the differences? And, and then somebody wants to argue the severity of the infraction and how, Ray Rice was worse than Kareem. I'm you're telling me there aren't enough good football players that this is what we have to do. And honestly, the worst part about that Brown story is that the former interim coach wasn't allowed to be the actual head coach because of the baggage that he had, which flies in the face of all the things that the NFL chooses to do. I mean, they don't seem to worry about that kind of thing. But, Sean Payton's down there in New Orleans, should have probably played in another Super Bowl, and he served his year, and nobody ever talks about that anymore. But Greg Williams can't get a full head coach job after he kind of turns the franchise around. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in the NFL.
You know what? Let me ask you about this and I did not watch the podcast, but I want to promote what you do with Accelerant. And Bill Cole is here from Cole Roofing. I want to give a shout out. Everybody knows Billy, 100 years, and you're doing like sort of a little bit of a media turn yourself. You and I become friends over the last couple decades, and you got a lot of business partners in the community. You've done a lot of roofs, schools, churches, homes, facilities, all sorts of things that you and your company done for 100 years, and you did a podcast with the folks at the Daily Record. I have not listened to it. I saw Greg Marlowe, my pal from Price Modern, who helped me with the chair that I actually sit in here that keeps me comfortable, along with Dr. Steve and my yoga game at 50, keeping my back together. But something about second chances, right? And
sure.
There is a story here with this kid who's going to go play football in Cleveland now, and apparently they're going to embrace him because they want to win in Cleveland. And the Frank Robinson story here, and I'll weigh you down on this, and then I'll let you just go on. I'd love to hear what you said on the Daily Record, so maybe you can conjure up your thoughts about second chances, because you employ a lot of people, right? And I've given people second chances in life. We've all given people second chances in life. Sometimes we've been burned, sometimes we haven't. But Frank Robinson, his second chance in life was the Baltimore Orioles, right? Luis Aparicio, his second chance in life was the Baltimore Orioles. I did a little research, and I don't know if you saw the picture that I put up of me and Milton Berle and Milton Berle and Luis Aparicio from the 66 World Series. I sort of shared that piece in social over the weekend. And I found that when Frank died, because when Frank died, I'm like, you know what? Frank and I were not chummy. I certainly did not have any disdain for Frank. Frank was just, arrogant, Hall of Famer, walked around, ran the place, didn't like me. I had a ponytail. And it became sort of like a fun little shtick we had, that he didn't like me and I would rib him a little bit and he'd laugh and smile and move on and it was fine, So I had no ill will with Frank. I never had a cross word with him, but I never had a good word with him either. I never sat and had the kinds of conversations that I've had with Brooks Robinson and Art Donovan and other people, in life, right?
Wait a second. Can I call time out?
Sure.
Did you say you had a ponytail?
You didn't see the video of Brad Pennington cutting my ponytail at Hooters?
We should probably revisit that sometime, because there's a whole therapy.
Hey, dude, I'm on your couch. I'm on your couch. What would you like to know? I hung at Hammerjacks. I had a girlfriend. She liked long hair.
The things we're so proud of.
What would you like to know, man? I mean, I was hanging out backstage with the Black Crows. What do you want me to say?
I understand.
It was 1991, right? What mistakes did you make in 1991 that you have on videotape, Anyway, but I digress. So Frank Robinson passes, and it takes me to finding the pictures I had with Frank Robinson, and I found two. One where it was accidental that he was in the picture with George Steinbrenner, that my friend took on the field in in 1998 at Jack Murphy Stadium at the World Series, okay? So I was on the field. A friend snapped a picture of Frank Robinson that I happened to be in the back of, and he waved to me. I smiled, boom. And this is like an Instamatic camera back in the day, right? So I have these two pictures of Frank Robinson. I'm like, I wonder if there's a really cool picture of Frank and Louie, man. They played on the 66 team, and I never went around and said, "Hey, I'm related to Louis Aparicio, Frank. You got to be my friend." That was the last thing in the world I did with my ponytail in 1991 as a journalist. I just wanted to be on the radio, do good radio, be a little bit of Greaseman, a little bit of Howard Stern, but having some knowledge and having respect for Frank Robinson and Brooks Robinson. I mean, Brooks to this day loves me, sees me, hugs me, asks me how my wife's doing. Frank was not that way. So I'm looking for this picture that does not exist. I was looking for any picture of Luis Aparicio and Frank Robinson, and I couldn't find one. But what I found was Luis and Milton Berle. And then I found one of me and Milton Berle. And I put it up there, right? And I thought to myself, all right, but I started looking at stories, Bill, and the stories about how Luis Aparicio got here. And he was a malcontent in Chicago. And this is how the Lords of the Realm, Bill Veeck, the owner of the Reds, how you got rid of your problem child employee who had talent, right? Because you own the employee, right? You got your best roofer over there, and you don't really want him anymore, but you don't want him working for Roofer X in Lansdowne. You want to send him off to the National League and send him someplace miserable because you really don't like him, but you control his whole life, his whole ability to earn a living, literally. And what you did if you were the Cincinnati Redlegs was send that uppity Frank Robinson over to Baltimore because you didn't want him anymore, and send me back some Phoebuses or some whatevers you want, and we'll go play baseball because we're the Lords of the Realm. And I don't want to give him a $5,000 raise or a $500 raise because I don't even like him. And look, his numbers were down last year, so ship him off to Baltimore. They never win anything. And they did that with Aparicio. The stories on Aparicio were unbelievable because he was flippant. And the way they write about athletes in those days, and Aparicio, whose English is better than most Venezuelans, was written in those terms. And Frank famously had problems in the South. I mean, everyone of his skin color famously had problems in the South in the 1960s. And those guys wound up in Baltimore on a second chance, Bill Cole, right? Because Bill Veeck didn't want Luis Aparicio, even though he was a good player, didn't want to give him the raise of whatever $2,000 it was or whatever meager number it was in the 1960s. And these guys were controlled before free agency, which began this movement that now Manny Machado and Bryce Harper find themselves not being able to get the $30 million 10-year deal they thought they were going to get. So I'll leave it to you. Second chances. Those were the second chances that became the Baltimore Orioles once I did a little research looking for a picture of my cousin, Frank Robinson, that I never found. So there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, I would not pretend to draw comparisons to the challenge of professional athletes and professional roofers.
In the 1960s, roofers had more opportunities than baseball players did.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff that goes into that makes for a really long conversation. I think the shorter version is for the teams who, take a chance on a guy. Present day might be like, well, no, that's probably bad. I was going to say Randy Moss, but that's probably not exactly the thought process I wanted to go down. But
the risk reward in the modern era is Chris Davis, who was a good guy and a good hitter, and you give him all that money and you regret it. The modern era is Josh Hamilton, who had drug problems and went and hit 50 home runs for a couple of years and then had them again. After he was signed out in California. So there are all sorts of personal issues, but second chance issues in any walk of life. For anyone who's had a problem, and I know you spoke about this at length in your industry, right?
Yeah, well, for us, I mean, it's just this concept that, and this wasn't, I can't claim to be, the inventor or even the guy who figured out that this was a good idea. This was, generational, how my grandfather started and built our business and how my father continued on. And, I just can't dispute it. There are good people in the world who, for a whole bunch of different reasons, find themselves in a very bad place, and they go through some stuff, and there's this potential launching point that they get to, that if they land in the right place where people appreciate what they do, and they give them the tools to go and learn and become better, build a career, I think...
Well, we see that in sports all the time, right? Like Julian Edelman, what would he have been if he was a Jet, right? Like, when you think about players and people in the right place in the right time, for sure.
Yeah, for our guys who get this second chance, I mean, I believe in their cores. Men are, DNA built to be providers, and they want to do good by their families, and they want to have meaningful work, and they want to be proud of what they do all day long. And in some of our neighborhoods in this town and in lots of towns around the country, what you're proud of is really screwed up. And the mentors that are around you, the people that you're seeing, we just send our youth off into really bad directions. And it isn't until something happens in their life where they get jolted and their eyes open up, and then, okay, let's rebuild this thing. And it starts real basic with some life skills, and then roofing, what I spoke to in the podcast was that, roofing is not rocket science. If a guy shows up here and he puts in, a good day's work and tries to learn the whole way in, short order, a year, 18 months, he can be one hell of a roofer. And now he's on a career path that it can be meaningful. You got to be the kind of person that gets done building or putting something together and look at it and be proud of that. And if you get that, sense of feeling, good feelings, then this is something that can be good for you, and they can rebuild their lives. And, we have a lot of people who have been down that path. So inherently in our company, everyone's kind of looking around, and, people are leaning on each other. And, I get, the information hits my desk because one of the other team members says, hey, I think so-and-so might be having a hard time. He missed some time last week, and, his wife's giving him a hard time, or, he's dealing with a kid that, isn't being very cooperative, and all that good stuff that kind of just, then all the baggage from their past and their history and their bad ways of dealing with challenges in their life start creeping up. And, it takes a village, right? So everybody's kind of looking around and trying to keep an eye on people, and we do the best we can. We certainly aren't batting 1,000, but we know that it's good for our business, and it's good for those people, and it's good for our community. So we just continue to go down that path every day.
Well, the second chance thing is interesting in life and in sports, and I found this whole Frank Robinson thing from a historical perspective to say, how did he wind up here? How did Luis Aparicio wind up here? And then the Kareem Hunt story this week is still about the NFL and Bob Costa. I'm very, very conflicted on the NFL right now, Bill. You know what I mean? Like, in a lot of ways where Steve Bisciotti is hibernating apparently at this point. I couldn't give my tickets away, so I'm a little bit of a disgruntled PSL owner, $1,800 in and saying, where's the value in what you guys are doing? And what's the league really standing for here? As I showed up at the Super Bowl and the LA Rams are in the Super Bowl and they don't have a fan base and they're building this $1 billion stadium out there for two teams and there ain't no team in Carson, and it's just really weird. You know what I mean? It starts to feel like a soak after a while. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, the Kareem Hunt thing for me is really difficult. I want to be mad at a guy who, seemingly has the world in the palm of his hand, right? He's a top 5 player in the league. He's probably, I don't know what his contract status is, but he's probably still in his rookie contract, so he's not making real money, but he's about to. So I want to get mad at a guy who doesn't seem to understand that and then makes bad decisions. But at the same time, you got to remember, oh yeah, what's he like, 23, 24? So then I go through the process in my head of like, oh yeah, I was making really great decisions at 23 and 24.
Yeah, it's nice being 50 now and looking back
right,
and saying,
sure.
hey, I'm still alive,
but okay, so fine, right, 23, 24-year-old, they tend to make bad decisions. Well, where is the Chiefs? Where are the people? I mean, and I know you hear stories and, maybe it's made for TV. I don't know how true it is, but they're spending a ton of more time trying to prepare these guys for all the people who are looking to take advantage of them, and
Well, the Ray Rice thing itself should be a cautionary tale for any player in the league, right? But it's also the Greg Hardy thing's also a cautionary tale, which is, if you're 26 and you can still play, you'll get signed by the Browns or the Redskins a week from Monday, or Jerry will find a place on the edge of his roster for you. Bisciotti doesn't want any part of it, which is good for him to some degree. But if you're not cheating, you're not trying, all that stuff, I don't know what to say about it anymore. I mean, the league has no soul. I mean, Colin Kaepernick has been blackballed. You know what I mean? And he's never punched anybody.
Yeah, that one I think is in a different bucket, but it comes back to the same story that we've been telling forever, and that's, we put such a high value on these kids when they're 12 years old because they're winning football games, and we carry that star through high school, into college, through college, and then they come out and they get drafted, and it's like, we won. It's the finish line, and all the handlers and all the people that started to latch on all along the way. We've talked about that.
Well, and then they wind up going from a really bad circumstance to like a Rolls Royce and a house and anything they want. And I still cringe when I think of poor Travis Taylor walking around the mall picking at his wife. I remember that stuff, and I remember people in the building cringing about that. But we see it. That's the life, right? That's the cribs and all the stuff. I mean, that's
absurdity.
Yeah, well, but that's part of us being older and having come from a circumstance that we worked hard to get whatever we had. They've worked hard to get whatever they've had, but they've also, there's that denial of all that, right? Wink, wink, the agents and the NCAA, and nobody gets a secret $100 handshake. But if that really is the case and you come into all this money and all this fame, there's no handbook for how to handle it. That's for sure.
Yeah, We've known this for a long time, that we put this premium on the kids, and that's fine, and they're not responsible for anything along the way. I mean, they get to the NFL, and one of my favorite stories was one of the players calling a friend of mine who is, I don't know, in that ecosystem, and his electricity got turned off. And it was like, well, did you pay the bill? And he, had no idea well, how does that work? I don't know. I've never done that.
I don't think these guys are that challenged because I've met the agents and people around them. If they're still that challenged, it's because they choose to be, at that point.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They've never
There are plenty of resources so that knuckleheaded stuff that happens under the NFL shield, I mean, they really are trying to make these guys not do knuckleheaded stuff, yes.
I get that, but they're doing it to try and, take that responsibility away from them instead of teaching that, to
fish, right. Giving them the fish instead of teaching them how to fish.
Yeah, there's a good chance that our rookie class doesn't know how to have a checkbook, right? Like, they've never had a checkbook. Well, you know what? That's not actually that foreign. There are a lot of kids whose, parents, may not have been economically savvy enough to talk to their 17 or 18-year-old about how to do that well. They might be living paycheck to paycheck, and that education just there's a gap in our system. Like, nobody in high school is teaching that.
By the way, I saw something on Twitter about grown-upping. 101. There are actual classes on how to be a grown-up. I saw it on the internet.
Exactly.
I thought of taking one myself, Bill. But
we could probably use it.
Yeah, you know what? Next week we'll grow up and we'll do a deeper dive into all of this. But I did learn a lot this week about Frank Robinson and our neighborhoods and how he couldn't live in certain places and he had to pay $200 more to live in a white neighborhood because he was black and just crazy 1965 stuff that happened in Baltimore that would never happen now. Of course not.
Right.
Bill, take care of yourself this week. I'm going to send everybody out. Cole Roofing. Bill Cole is my dear friend, accelerant partner, all that great stuff out there, as well as our partner here. Tell me what you do in 30 seconds or less, and then I'll let you go do it.
Sure. Commercial roofing for over 100 years. Everything from a leak and a repair up to re-roofing commercial buildings, hospitals, schools, shopping centers, all the likes. Really just looking to help people solve their problems. When you get water coming into your building, it's a pretty big deal, and we want to be there to help you. So we're here. The web address, coleroofing.com. That's the best way to find us. And, we'd love to help you.
You just said when you get water all over your place, it's a big deal. I want you to watch the cat video my wife's going to put out later today, okay? You'll learn about getting water all over the place. Bill Cole, Cole Roofing. You can find him at coleroofing.com. Everything's up there. And if you can't find him, find me, and I'll make sure you can find him. Nasty at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.